Hey everyone, Josh here with a gaming laptop optimization video. This could work for pretty much any gaming laptop. I have here the Asus Zephyrus G15. I have the RTX 3070 version with the Ryzen 9 5900HS. I'm going to be going over a lot of things such as quality control, updates, drivers, making sure you're getting the best performance, tips and tricks, Windows settings, Armoury Crate, fan noise, troubleshooting, and some good little performance boosting tips. And a lot of this will apply to any gaming laptop, like I said. So even if you don't have this one, stick around. You might find something here that could help with any laptop. And I'm going to go ahead and put this at the beginning of the video since this took so long to make. If you want to help the channel grow, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. Maybe even hit that bell too for notifications for when any new videos are posted. And yeah, thanks so much for your support. Now let's go ahead and get into it. So if you have the Zephyrus G15, it doesn't matter if you have the RTX 3070 or 3080. I know there's some other versions out there, but most of the same stuff will apply here. So let's go ahead and start with quality control. There's some things you want to look over. Just make sure you got a good unit. Most people have gotten this from Best Buy in the US, so they're usually pretty good about returning or swapping out for a new one if something is wrong with yours. Unfortunately, there is a bunch of stock issues, so it's not always guaranteed that you're going to get one right away, so that's kind of annoying, but it's 2021, 2022, stock issues are everywhere. It's a great time. Everyone's loving it. So for quality control, it really comes down to what you're okay with. This could be, something that bothers me about a laptop might not bother you at all. But I'm going to be going over just some basic things to check, especially for the G15. So first thing you want to check for is to make sure the trackpad is aligned. I think the way that mine is here looks pretty good. Make sure that it has no rattle when you're clicking on it. A little bit of rattle is okay, but if it's bad, if it's annoying to you, that might be an issue. Trackpad rattle can be a pretty common quality control issue. It happens to a lot of laptops, even MacBooks, but so definitely something to check. Make sure your keys are aligned. This isn't really a big deal either unless it bothers you. If one key is like a little bit crooked or something, I mean, it's just one of those things. And for vents, this isn't really something you have to worry about too much. This is like one that's really gotten blown out of proportion. A lot of laptops have this same design where the vents kind of blow on the bottom bezel of the screen. It works fine. They've tested this. People have tested this for weeks, mining cryptocurrency for weeks straight on max performance with these things. So not a big deal. The biggest thing that could happen is if the bezel wasn't seated right, if the glue wasn't applied correctly, then over time that could become an issue, but that would happen anyway, regardless of the vents blowing onto it. So just something to be aware of. Make sure that your bezel is seated correctly right there. Make sure your screen and bezel are flush and correct. Also open your hinge and make sure there's no weird like creaking sounds or something like that might bother you. Sometimes little noises don't really bother some people, but another thing that, depends on the person. Also, make sure your screen is not curved or bent. This isn't necessarily a terrible thing if it is a little bit, but it's another thing that might bother you, especially if you're trying to close the laptop and it's not sitting flush. So yeah, make sure you close the lid, make sure it looks flush, make sure it looks even. And then the last thing is to check for backlight bleed. You can play some darker videos or something like that and see if you have any backlight bleeding issues. This is also one of those things that most people don't even notice unless it's really bad. So if you're playing a game and you just notice it all the time as you're playing, then yeah, you might want to swap for a different unit. But if it's just a little bit of backlight bleed, from what I've seen, it doesn't usually get worse over time. It usually gets a little better over time, or about the same. So, but definitely something to at least check. Now with the G15, as you might have seen in my previous videos, you can get a performance boost from hooking up to an external monitor. This is the cable I recommend. It's from Cable Matters on Amazon. It's just a USB-C to DisplayPort cable for your monitor. This one has just worked really well for me. I've used a couple cables in the past that broke or didn't provide the right bandwidth to run like 165 Hertz and 1440p at the same time. So this cable has not failed me. It's been a really good cable. So I'm going to throw that here. And another just little tidbit before we get into it. With this hinge design, it's probably for the best to angle it back just a little bit so that you get some extra airflow underneath the laptop. This helps with temperatures a little bit. All right, now let's get started with, say you're booting up this laptop for the first time and you're just going through the setup. These are the first things you want to make sure of for updates, drivers, things like that. So first you want to start with Windows Update. You'll have to decide yourself if you want to go with Windows 10 or 11. That is entirely up to you. They both seem to perform about the same. I haven't really seen anything showing that one is significantly better than the other. So I've gone ahead and just done Windows 11 on mine because I just like the way it looks and I like some of the features, and I'm excited to see some of the upcoming features that they do for it. But that's up to you. Any other updates from Windows, just go ahead and let them go through. Once that's done, you should have My Asus installed on your laptop. If not, you can download it from the Asus website. Just open the customer support tab and you will see the drivers and updates available right there. You can also do a system diagnosis right there too. I recommend doing that maybe after you've installed and updated everything. So they have live update, which will tell you the latest drivers that you need to install. And if you need to install anything manually, just go to latest and you can choose the latest drivers right here in case maybe you missed something or if the software missed something. They're all right there. Or if you need to roll back a driver that might not be working with your machine, there's different versions of most of the drivers right here. Now, I don't recommend downloading the AMD or Nvidia drivers from here. They're super outdated usually from Asus. Just, you know, they might give you like a higher time spy score, but a lot of games will not be optimized and may run a lot worse if you're using these older drivers compared to the newer drivers from AMD and Nvidia themselves. So you don't really have to do those, or if you did, it's fine. You can always update them later. Next thing is open the Microsoft Store and check for updates here. People miss this one a lot, but sometimes there are some important updates for certain apps such as My Asus. And then the last place to check for updates is Armoury Crate. What you do is you just go to the settings tab and then update center and just check for updates and you'll see what's available there. If you don't have Armoury Crate yet, you can get it from the Asus website from their drivers and software page. Now, next thing, after you've updated everything, we're going to get you on AMD's Radeon software. What you want to do is just go to AMD's website. I usually just Google AMD Radeon software. There's going to be a downloader for the software. It auto detects your system for you, which is nice. Just download that. And after that, go ahead and download Nvidia's Geforce experience from their website. Now, once you've got AMD Radeon installed, you can open it here. It has some cool metrics and stuff. Once you have it, you can check for updates directly in the app itself. These don't come out super often though, but you can also enable automatic updates if you choose to do so. In the preferences, you can choose to have it look for optional updates as well. These are like the beta drivers. I usually have it enabled because I don't know, I just like to test whatever the latest one is. So that's just me. But for the rest of the Radeon software, I'll walk you through just some of the basic stuff here. So under the graphics tab, just make sure all this is disabled. It should be disabled by default. The only thing that's enabled by default for some reason is surface format optimization. I just leave it enabled because they must have it enabled for some reason. I'm not too sure. Over in the display tab, make sure that FreeSync is enabled and Very Bright is disabled. Very Bright can make your screen pretty dim and washed out looking, so make sure that's disabled. You can also mess with the color on your screen if you're unhappy with the colors. You can go to custom color, enable that, and change it as you please. You can also see the specs of your display, such as your FreeSync range, which is 48 to 165 hertz. So just be aware that anything under 48 hertz will not be covered by FreeSync. So if you're running a game at 35 FPS, it's not going to get FreeSync. Just something to be aware of. Most people, I mean, if you're playing a game at that low of a frame rate anyway, it's just not going to look so great. So, you might want to consider lowering some settings at that point anyway. For video profiles, I recommend keeping that on default. Your G15 is color calibrated from the factory, so I don't usually mess with that. Now, preferences. Hotkeys, I usually just keep this disabled because there's really just nothing here I'm going to use. Performance, I'll disable in-game overlay and web browser. I don't plan on using those. I'll keep the system tray enabled because sometimes I click on it to check on stuff and check for updates. And then if you go to settings and performance, there's a little setting here in the tuning tab where you can actually overclock your CPU. There isn't really any customization to this. There's just an automatic overclock available. Mine let me go up to 0.2 gigahertz of an offset. This did improve my time spy score, but I mean, for gaming performance, it hasn't seemed to do anything or much of anything. But if you're trying to get that little extra CPU score in time spy, you can go ahead and check this and it will help a little bit. And at really no thermal cost, or at least not much of one because it's not much of an offset. You'll have to restart your PC after doing this. And if you want to get rid of the overclock, just hit this little reset button up here, and that will put you back at your normal clock speed. Now let's go over the Nvidia control panel. So here you have your Nvidia controls. You can set things up per game or universally, however you want. I usually just keep it at default because I just let it decide. It does what it needs to do anyway for the most part. I would only mess with this if you're having issues with something. If you have a monitor connected, you'll have additional settings here. So you'll be able to enable G-Sync, for example, if your monitor supports it, changing colors, refresh rate, and so forth on your external monitor. And now Geforce experience is a little different. This is where you get your Nvidia drivers. I always do the custom installation, and once I'm in here, I will perform a clean installation. This gets rid of any Nvidia controls panel settings that you had set up before, but I mean, I like to do that anyway, just because I like to have a fresh start in case I accidentally messed something up. So, you know, I usually do that, especially if you're like experiencing an issue with something. It's a good idea to do a clean install. And then an extra piece of software, let's talk about MSI Afterburner. So you'll want to just download MSI Afterburner from their website. Once you've opened this, and what you'll see is you have voltage, clock, and fans. But the only thing you're really going to want to mess with is clock. Unless you're undervolting, then you might mess with the voltage. But clock speed, you can do a overclock. Usually around like 100 to 200 is like a safe area to overclock your GPU. And then for memory, around the same area, you know, plus 50 to plus 200, usually around there. And it doesn't really hurt anything. It might increase your GPU temperatures a little bit, so don't go too hard. But most games will crash before temperatures get too hot anyway. So if you overclock too far, it'll get unstable, and you'll notice. You'll see artifacts and games and stuff like that. So mess with that as you please, but it does get you some more FPS in games. Just something to be aware of. And then in the settings here, this is actually the most important part, is the monitoring. So it comes with this software called RTSS. That's an overlay tool where you can monitor GPU temperature, GPU usage, your clock speed, frame rates. So highly recommend at least enabling those. All you got to do is just make sure this is checked, and then click on it and make sure show in on-screen display is checked. And then every time you have MSI Afterburner open, you should see this in the top corner of your screen as you're playing. And this kind of just helps you kind of diagnose if something is wrong, or just to see how your performance is going in games. It can be addicting to just always have this open and be just checking your FPS all the time. Just make sure it's not like ruining your experience, because I mean, at the end of the day, you want to have fun with your gaming laptop, not just be, tweaking it all the time. So it's definitely a rabbit hole, not super fun, because I have fallen in it myself. And yeah, so anyways, I'll talk more about the voltage curve later for undervolting, but yeah. And for some reason, if it's not showing up in games for you, just open RTS overlay down here, Riva Tuner. You can change the detection level to low, or try stealth mode, and sometimes that helps it. Sometimes some games kind of misidentify it as like a anti-cheat or something. So yeah. Now let's look at the Windows settings, what you will need to have enabled and whatnot. So in your Windows settings, for sign-in, you're going to want to reconfigure your fingerprint probably multiple times until you get it working correctly. For me, it took multiple tries to get it right, but after a while, I've gotten it to where it pretty much recognizes my finger within the first couple tries. So it's nice to have, and it's worth taking the time to get it set up correctly. My recommendation is to just try it a few different ways, different angles, different placements on the fingerprint scanner until it's working really good. Next thing, in your Windows settings, you'll see game bar. I leave this enabled because I have a lot of friends who play on Xbox, and this is how you can have a Xbox party chat, join your friends in games, stuff like that. But if you have this enabled, you should probably make sure that record capture is off. So just go here, record what happened, make sure that's off, because I have seen that it does eat some CPU power. So just keep that off unless you really want to record through game bar. Now in the display settings, you'll see anything that has to do with, brightness, display, stuff like that. Here, your factory calibrated color profile is right there. Your Windows scaling is right here, which is pretty self-explanatory. You kind of just mess with that until it looks good for you. Good thing with like a QHD screen is you can lower that and it'll still look pretty good without getting too pixelated like it would on 1080p. If you're using an external display, it'll show up here as like display number 2. I usually will extend it. Sometimes it's not it doesn't do that by default, but I'll extend, hit advanced display settings, and make sure that your monitor is at its max refresh rate. Sometimes Windows likes to put it at something low, like 60 hertz, even if you have a 165 hertz monitor. I don't know why it does that, but just something to double check so that your monitor is being used correctly by Windows. One thing I do is I go to the graphic settings and I'll set all my games to high performance. Does this actually do anything? I don't know, but I feel like it does, and at least it gives me peace of mind that my game will hopefully not choose like Radeon built-in graphics instead of the Nvidia GPU. So yeah, and then the next thing, there's a Windows 11 setting that has been known to cause some minor performance loss. All you got to do is just go into core isolation here in the device security settings and make sure memory integrity is off. And then you can also find variable refresh rate right here. I keep that on. I don't know. I think it's on by default. I don't think it hurts anything, so keep that on. And then last thing before we get into Armoury Crate is Dolby Access. You should have that after downloading all your drivers and software. This is where you can just adjust your speakers, how they sound. So highly recommend going through this software and making sure it sounds good to you. I actually keep mine disabled because I've found that it sounds better to me at least, and it's louder. So I usually just keep it disabled. All right, so now let's talk about Armoury Crate. This is where you get all the control for your Asus laptop. So your performance profiles are right here. The Windows one is just like the standard Windows profile, which is usually like balanced or high performance. I'll usually keep it on balanced, but I don't usually use the Windows profile anyway, so that's whatever. Silent is for, it'll keep the fans pretty quiet most of the time. Usually they're off. And performance is just a basic, high performance profile. And then turbo gives you the highest performance, but fans will kick in quite a bit. And then manual, you can adjust fan curves and a lot here. And you can have super loud fans and super high performance on this one, but we'll go over that in a second. One thing I want to talk about is turbo boost. So if you're playing games and you're noticing that your CPU is always super high in temperature, you can disable turbo boost. I will link an article on how to do that. It's a registry edit. And once you have done it, you can set it up for each power plan, whether you want it to have turbo boost on or off. For silent, I usually keep it off because I really just do not want anything to ramp that CPU up at all on silent mode. But basically what it does is it limits your CPU to clock at around 3.2 gigahertz. And that lowers temperatures by quite a bit, especially when gaming, and it doesn't really reduce performance too much. Some people have noticed that it improves performance for them. It's something worth trying at least. So yeah, I'll link to that below. You can check that out. And you'll notice, when you click on a power plan in Armoury Crate, that the edit power plan window in Windows changes depending on what you chose. One thing to keep in mind, manual shows up as turbo, although it is treated differently. So let's talk about manual real quick. So in manual mode, if you hit these three little dots, you can set up multiple profiles here. I like to have like a high performance profile and like a silent profile, which I'll talk about later in the fan noise section. With each profile, you can edit quite a bit here. Your SPL is like the wattage that your CPU will tend to hover around when it's gaming for a while. And then SPPT is like your short like boost wattage. So like this is when your CPU needs to hit, full power for like 10 seconds to get a program open quickly. So this one can go up to 80 watts, and then SPL can go up to 45. So in CPU heavy games, you might see your CPU running at 45 watts for a sustained time. So say you have SPL set at 45 and then SPPT set at 65, and then you open a game that's super CPU heavy, you might see it hit 65 watts when it's loading a level, and then you might see it hit like 45 watts or something for a sustained amount of time while you're playing when it's needed. So that's like the basics of that. You can mess with this as you please until you find what works best for you. And then you have your fan curves right here, which is one of the really cool parts about using Armoury Crate. You can choose how the fans ramp up. So you can do a really aggressive fan curve or just a really smooth one so that the fans don't really catch you off guard too much when they're ramping up. You can have it a very slow build up as you're playing and all sorts of stuff. If you set it too low, it'll stop you so that you're not going to overheat anything. And then you just hit this little checkbox when you're ready to apply. It'll give you a warning. That's fine. Just hit OK. And now in the GPU section here, you have your overclock, which is exactly the same as like how it is in MSI Afterburner. Your base clock offset is right here, memory right there. GPU power saver, keep this on default if you're like gaming or something. But if you're trying to get like good battery life or low fan speeds, you can go ahead and put that on advanced or extreme. And then you also have your separate fan curve right here for your GPU. Now for the other settings here in system configuration, you just have some basic stuff, but there's some really cool ones here. So first of all, boot up sound. If you don't like that noise it makes when it starts up, you can disable that here. Panel overdrive. This is for getting the highest maximum panel response time out of your monitor. So if you're gaming, definitely keep that on. And then iGPU mode allows you to disable your Nvidia RTX GPU completely. This is great for battery life, or if you really want those temps as low as possible and you don't want fans to kick in, this is good. And you can also even set it to auto. So as soon as you unplug your device, it will automatically disable that RTX and only run off the AMD graphics, which is really good for getting great battery life. You also have like scenario profiles here, which is basically if you want to make Armoury Crate do a certain task when you open a certain program, which is pretty cool. And then you also have shared cam, which is for using your phone as a webcam. Now in the lighting tab, you can choose from basic lighting settings here. You can get as creative as you want here. There's also Aura Sync, which lets you go into some more advanced lighting settings. One thing that I disabled from the get-go was the breathing light when the laptop is sleeping. I just found that kind of annoying, so you can disable that one here. The game visual tab just allows you to select from some basic color profile presets. I usually keep it on default, but some of these may be worth trying. You can adjust color temperature on each one, just basic presets for the most part. You can also calibrate your display professionally right here if you have an X-Rite. And then in settings, you just have different themes, your updates, and about. Okay, so let's talk about fans. So if you're trying to get quiet fan speed, silent mode is usually the go-to. For any other laptop, it's usually like quiet mode or something like that. Asus does a really good job on keeping silent mode silent. Your fans may come on still, but they're usually super quiet when they do. I know people who have MacBooks, at least before like the M1, whose, you know, their fans will just ramp up like crazy, and I'm over here with a gaming laptop and it's quieter than a Mac. You know, it's very thankful for Asus tuning this thing so well. Sometimes the switching to Windows mode will actually work really good too. You might find it do better than silent, up to you. Just make sure, you know, boost is disabled for the quietest experience. You know, and if neither of those are working, or this is just another way to do it, you can also set up a manual profile for silence. What I do for this is I just turn the CPU sliders all the way down, so the CPU is using the lowest wattage possible, and I'll put the fans on the lowest curve possible that the software will allow you to do. It will stop you from doing anything lower than it says, but I mean, it's good that they have that in place because, you know, you don't want anything to overheat. So just put the fan curve as low as you want, make sure boost is off, but you know, don't forget to re-enable boost when you want to game with boost on. I'll apply that, and I do the same for the GPU. Sliders all the way down, GPU on extreme power saver, fan curve as low as possible. If I can, I will do iGPU mode on. Sometimes you might have a program already using your GPU, so what you'll need to do is just close out of that program, which you can do right here in Armoury Crate. Then go ahead and swap over to the iGPU, and you can reopen that program now. Now with iGPU mode on, fan speeds and temperatures should be even lower. And another way to keep it even more quiet and temperatures even lower is to just unplug. You know, as soon as you unplug, having the laptop on battery usually always has the best temperatures, keeps them at their lowest. I guess they assume at that point you're on the go, and you know, if it's on your lap or something, you don't want to be burning your legs up. So yeah, if it's on battery, it usually stays pretty cool. But you know, if it's also on battery, you're not gonna be able to use the USB-C port out. But as long as you are in iGPU mode, before you connect the monitor, it will work as long as you use HDMI port. So you can have the RTX GPU disabled and plug your monitor in through HDMI, which is nice for if you're doing like a meeting or something and you need to hook up to the TV or watch a movie. You can have the HDMI port without it, you know, draining your battery by having the RTX card enabled. One thing I want to talk about too for temperatures is the AMD APU Tuning Utility. So this is basically like the new version of Ryzen controller, which you may have heard of, except for it updates itself and it's continuously improving. It's basically just, it's a program that lets you control wattage even more and temperatures. So for example, all you do is you just open this here. It'll open in your tray menu. You can change your temperature limit right here. You know, say your fans kick in at like 68 or something. You can set it to, you know, somewhere in the 60s right before your fans start to usually kick in. What it'll do is it'll dynamically control the power of your laptop laptop to make sure that it does not hit that temperature. Obviously, I wouldn't set this too low, you know, it might mess with some things, but it is pretty helpful for advanced tuning as well of things like your TDP, which is kind of like the same as those sliders I showed you earlier, but you can adjust them even more for like the length of time that it's boosting for, or, you know, stuff like that. This can also be helpful in games, because if you really don't want your game to hit like 90 or 100 or something, just type the maximum temperature limit right here in this box. Just check that one, update output, apply settings, and it will work on its own dynamically to make sure that that temperature limit is not exceeded. And it does a really good job. So for each setting, just check the box for the setting that you want applied. You don't have to use all of them. You don't even have to type numbers in all of them. As long as the box is checked, that's the only one that will be applied. They even have pre-made presets for the 5900HS, which is cool, and it gives you a good starting point. Now, some battery tips. If you want maximum battery life, when you're unplugged, you know, just make sure panel power saver is enabled if you desire. I don't usually have it enabled because I like the high refresh rate, so I just keep that disabled. iGPU mode, make sure that's on or on auto. That way you're not using your RTX 3070 or 3080 whenever you're just trying to do basic tasks. I mean, even using like some heavier duty things will run fine on AMD Radeon graphics, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, especially when you're on battery and you're trying to maximize battery life. Radeon graphics can handle a lot of stuff really well, actually. So those two settings alone will probably grant you, you know, 8 to 10 hours right there. But you also have battery saver in Windows settings. This one can help too a little bit. And then make sure your screen timeout settings are set correctly to where, you know, your screen isn't just on the whole time while your laptop's idling. And of course, you know, make sure you lower your brightness a little bit and lower your keyboard lighting, or just turn it off, and that will grant you an extra little battery boost. So with those things on this laptop, at least, you can easily get 8 to 10 hours, possibly even more depending on what you're doing. All right, so now let's talk some just fun little quick tips and tricks right here. A lot of people don't think about this, but you can actually expand your storage in the G15 with a micro SD card. So the cool thing with the micro SD slot is the card actually goes all the way in. You'll never even notice it there. So all you got to do is you can pick up a 256 like I have here, or a 512 gigabyte card off of Amazon. I'm using the Samsung Evo. You just plug it in. I wouldn't install a game on here or anything, but you know, it works really well for photos, videos, and the transfer speed is actually not bad either. So that could potentially get you some really easy and cheap storage. And then another one is using your phone as your webcam. A lot of people have a gripe with this machine because it has no webcam, but it's actually really easy to set up your phone as a webcam on this thing. So all you got to do is just open My Asus, make sure that the app is downloaded on your phone, which it'll allow you to do here. Once you've downloaded the app, it will search for your phone, and once they're connected, all you got to do is just use your phone as a webcam, open up any camera or face cam, and boom, you're good to go. Okay, now let's talk troubleshooting. So I'm going to go over some common issues that I see with the G15 or just any gaming laptop in general. So if you're experiencing any of these, I hope this helps. Sometimes after installing everything, you might be missing some essential drivers such as keyboard lighting or something like that. If that's the case, just search eSupport on the Zephyrus G15 Reddit, and people have uploaded their eSupport folder which contains these drivers. You also may run into an issue where you try to open AMD Radeon and it says the drivers do not match. This is because Windows is trying to automatically update you back to an older driver. This was happening to me, and if this is happening to you, all you got to do is just download the Microsoft Show or Hide Updates Troubleshooter from this website or any website you can find it, and that will fix the issue. Just run the troubleshooter, select the update that's messing you up, it'll fix the rest. The next issue that I see a lot is the sleep issue. This one's covered a lot on the Zephyrus G15 subreddit. I usually just put mine in hibernate since I don't want it to use any battery when it's sleeping anyway, and it comes back on pretty quickly from hibernate, so I just do that. But it seems to be a lot of things that cause this. Windows itself has problems with letting laptops go to sleep. In some occasions, it might be your Bluetooth or Wi-Fi card waking up the laptop. From what I've seen, it's just a variety of things. So one thing to try, going into airplane mode or a few other things like that. You can always check the Zephyrus G15 subreddit for any updates and what other people have tried if you're having this issue. Another one I see, and this one's common on a lot of gaming laptops, is the GPU not using its full wattage. You're going to want to make sure whisper mode or some other weird setting isn't enabled in Nvidia Geforce Experience. You can find that here, but it could also just be bad optimization for the game you're playing, such as Battlefield 2042. That one is known to not be super optimized, and it's using very little GPU. Even for people that have a desktop 3080, it's still only using very little of their GPU, and they're not getting good frame rates, and the game isn't really running smooth because of that. Now, GPU wattage can actually be more of a complicated issue, and it's not just on the G15. This can happen to any gaming laptop or even gaming desktop. If your GPU hasn't had any problems with dynamic boost and it's hitting its full wattage when it needs to, then you can go ahead and skip this part because it does get a little complex. So feel free to skip ahead a few minutes if this doesn't apply to you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just make sure you're measuring your wattage accurately. So on Armoury Crate, it says TGP 80 watts right here. That doesn't mean that's what your GPU is using or what it's capable of using. It can definitely go beyond that. So make sure you're using something like MSI Afterburner or Nvidia Geforce overlay to see an accurate picture of what your GPU wattage is in the moment. So for MSI Afterburner, you would just go to GPU power here and just make sure that is enabled to show in the monitoring. And just make sure also that you have the right GPU selected here. So for me, GPU 2 is the 3070, while GPU 1 is just the AMD Radeon graphics. One thing you can try is just go to Nvidia Control Panel, manage 3D settings, and then program settings, and choose the program, the game that is having trouble, and go ahead and just try to set that to prefer the high performance Nvidia processor. I'm not sure if this does anything because it usually auto selects anyway, but that's one thing to try at least. Next thing, go to system information and just make sure that dynamic boost has yes or enabled next to it. If so, then that's good. If it says no, then you're going to need to completely uninstall your Nvidia driver and reinstall one. Next thing you can try, maybe the game you're playing is just requiring more CPU power than it really needs. So what you can do is go into performance boost mode in your power plan. This is called turbo boost, and just disable it there. This limits the CPU to 3.2 gigahertz, thus giving your GPU a little bit more leeway in what it can boost to. Another way of doing this is to go in Armoury Crate, go to manual mode, and then SPL, which is your wattage slider for what your CPU will mostly run at. You can change it to about 20 or 25 here. This should allow the GPU to boost up to 100 watts a lot more easily. That way you're basically telling the CPU not to go above that wattage in the long term. And then the SPPT, you can leave that at 65, 70, whatever you want. That's just for a short-term boost. And then the GPU, you can set this at whatever. Just make sure your power saver is at default and not extreme. Hit the checkbox to make those changes and then give that a shot. One thing I did read online though is that core isolation, memory integrity could have something to do with this. So make sure that's off for you. That could be the easiest way to solve this problem. I'm not sure. I just saw someone post that online. Now, if none of that works, you tried all of this and it's still just not hitting above 80 watts, it's just not boosting at all, I'm going to link a video in the description to follow. Basically, this involves using a program called DDU to completely uninstall your Nvidia driver and everything with it. You might just have driver bloat, different things might be outdated, and you might just need a fresh install of your display driver completely. So instead of just installing on top of the one you have now, this is basically just uninstalling completely everything and just reinstalling a fresh driver. It might not even be that the current one is the best either, so you might have to do this a few times before you find an Nvidia driver that plays well with your system. So yeah, follow that guide for more info there, and I hope that solves your problem if this is an issue for you, but it's definitely worth looking into because you want to get the most wattage you can out of your GPU, especially when it's capable of it. But just do be aware that some games require a lot of CPU power, and that's sometimes just how it is, and your GPU might not use that full 100 watts, and that's okay. Sometimes it might just be a loading screen that it's not using that wattage or something like that. So just be aware that it's not always going to boost to 100 watts. It is game and task specific. Another issue I see is the Wi-Fi not working. It seems that the latest MediaTek driver does solve this problem, but for some people who might still be having that issue, you can always replace your Wi-Fi card for about $20-$30 with an Intel Wi-Fi 6 card. Low time spy score is another one I see a lot. Again, make sure that whisper mode is not enabled. Check and see if you have dual channel RAM. Sometimes some gaming laptops are shipped with only one stick of RAM. So if you have one stick of RAM and it's running in single channel, that is definitely going to affect your time spy score. There's programs out there that let you check that, or you can just open up the laptop and see for yourself. Some people have seen performance improvements too from uninstalling AMD Radeon completely and just using the driver provided by Asus. Another time spy thing I see is glitching and artifacts popping up while doing a time spy run. This just means your overclock is too high and you just need to ease back on that overclock. I notice for my G15, if I'm going over like plus 150 on core clock or over plus 200 on memory, it will start to show artifacts. So that one's a simple solution. One I've seen too is the speakers sounding muffled. This could just mean that you're on an outdated BIOS. Asus has put out quite a few BIOS and driver updates that address the speaker issue. So just make sure you're on the latest BIOS, and then you can manually adjust your Dolby sound settings until you're happy. There's a custom EQ in there that you can use to tweak it, or you can just turn Dolby off completely and that might solve your problem. And then as a little bonus, this is just a caution, not really troubleshooting, but do not close the lid while gaming on this. The G15 is designed to time out if you do this to prevent itself from overheating, because the vents then would be blowing right directly into the laptop. All right, so making sure your laptop is performing well, I suggest using Time Spy. You can download the demo for free. Another good one is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which you can also just download the demo for. These are both great benchmarks that are used by a lot of people. The Time Spy demo, if you have the 3070, you should be scoring in the mid 9000s or upper 9000s on an external screen. The 3080 should have upper 9000s to 10,000s in hybrid and about 10 to 11,000 on external, maybe a little bit more. Manual mode and Armoury Crate may perform better than turbo, but the fans will be louder. But a lot of people, when they run Time Spy, they do it in manual, so don't be upset if you ran it in turbo or performance and it came out a little lower. Another little tip is you can also disable Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome from running in the background after you close them. They both have a setting for that, and I'll link a video that I used for some other performance tips as well. Another thing too is every once in a while, maybe every few months or so, it might be good to just open the back of your laptop and dust out the fans. You might have a lot of dust collecting in there. If your temps are just unusually high, that could be the reason. You can just take like a small paintbrush or something to gently wipe the dust out of the fans, and that usually works pretty well. Now, undervolting, this is a big one. So if you want to boost that Time Spy score and maybe boost some FPS a little bit, you can try undervolting. So here's an example of me playing Forza. While undervolting, you can see here how the clock speed stays high, but the temps are low. So to give a quick overview on what that is, undervolting is basically when you're telling your GPU to run at a certain clock speed at a certain voltage, and you just keep lowering it until you have reached a point where temperatures are satisfactory and clock speed is still high. And there's really no danger to this. The worst that'll happen is, things might become unstable, the game might crash. Worst case, your laptop restarts, but it'll reset your undervolt settings as soon as it comes back up. But all you have to do to make this happen is you go into MSI Afterburner, you check unlock voltage curve in the settings, and I'm going to put a link in the description for exactly how to undervolt and how I did it. It works best when you combine a bit of an overclock with an undervolt. That way you're able to overclock your GPU, get more performance without sacrificing and having all those high temperatures from it. Just for an example, I'll show you the curve I was able to obtain. This is, like I was saying, this is a slight overclock with an undervolt. So you can check out these voltage curves. They might work for you, they might not. It seems to vary by the machine, but it's not too hard to do. I definitely recommend that, and you can save it as a preset in MSI Afterburner, and it helps to squeeze out a little bit more performance out of your G15. Next thing I want to talk about is upgrading your RAM. So there's a huge misconception out there, and I'm going to make a whole video on this, but there's a big misconception about upgrading one of the slots of RAM when the other is soldered to the motherboard. The common belief is that this will hurt performance and you'll lose your dual channel support. That is actually not the case, and it has been proven by many people now. In a lot of cases, you'll actually see an increase in performance by upgrading your RAM to a certain degree. So after seeing Jared's Tech post about this, he made a video combining all different types of RAM. It seems like 24 gigabytes is actually a really good spot, and 40 gigabytes even is not bad either. After watching his video, I think 24 gigabytes is probably the sweet spot, which kind of works out for me because I already have 24 gigabytes in mine after upgrading to a 16 gigabyte stick, which I'll link that in the description below as well. Another quick thing, if you're seeing temperatures in the 90s while playing games on your laptop, that's actually perfectly normal. AMD CPUs are designed to handle that without issues. Laptop components in general are designed to handle much higher heat than their desktop counterparts. To be honest, and even Jared's Tech has agreed in his Q&A video, the big concern around temperatures really isn't as big of a deal as people make it out to be. So, don't be too worried when, if your GPU and CPU are getting up there. It's usually not a concern unless it's just always like high 90s and just thermal throttling all the time. Otherwise, it's really not that big of a deal. So that's about it. If this video helped you out at all, please leave a like and subscribe. Maybe even hit that bell for notifications to help the channel grow. Sorry this video was so long though, I just really wanted to cover everything I've learned about this laptop. and answer a lot of the questions and concerns that I've seen on Reddit, and just kind of clear up some misconceptions out there that people may have. Hope you enjoyed the video. I have a few others in the works that I will link to when they're done, including a complete RAM upgrade video, a VBIOS upgrade video, and a comparison to the Lenovo Legion 7i. So be on the lookout for those. But anyways, thanks so much, guys. See you next time.